combined check-in. Haven't done one of these in about 2 weeks. Just got a little behind. Shit happens. Told you I was going to do this just like one of my athletes, so I'm due to skip at least one check-in, right? Here's my triple. These are nothing really special. It's kind of movement I've chosen to just continually stimulate the my max strength. Picking the safety squats based on what I can hold positioning under the best, leaving the band tension the same for now. I'll drop that when I get into contest prep and just do straight weight. But for now, I'm just going to leave that 70 pounds of tension. I'm done fucking around with the ups and downs. I think I found my sweet spot, and I just want to stick with that. Snatch grips are going fine, but I'm about, like anywhere from 12 to 16 weeks out from this contest, which means there's quite a few transitional points in this last week or two. That's kind of why I saved it to do a combination of them, because there are some changes being made to kind of blend into the next phase of things. It wasn't really program changes as much as just kind of continuations of certain sensations I was feeling. Like I've talked about before, there's never going to be like a clear cut date when everything seems to line up. So kind of what I went through this last week or two was more so of the blend of certain progressors and certain stimuluses just kind of fitting together more in a Tetris manner rather than a clear block type thing. So it was quite a bit of transition period. One of those things is getting my farmers up to heavy weight again. So I'm, rather than doing the corrective one-sided mechanical type thing, I'm going to progress that into heavy picks and put that in place of my snatch grip. So that's what you'll see from now on, is right after my squats, I'll be hitting heavy singles, doubles, or triples on farmers picks. So one thing you'll notice is that the purpose of each movement stays the same, but the movement itself and the rep scheme, all that will change as we kind of go along. I ditched the front rack push presses. I just couldn't handle enough weight without my form breaking down to justify it as a strength movement. So it's back to the behind the neck push presses. Had to adjust that a little bit. But it's pretty obvious that this is the movement I should be using for strength, especially if dumbbell is my main goal. This felt like a really shitty and off day, and I think it was because it was the day that I went back to using these instead of the front rack push presses, so I felt just like a lot of looseness in the dip, not great timing. What you'll see later in this video is the next week's session and how I have it set up. It cleans up a lot more. But I do feel that taking that 2 weeks to experiment with the push press and put the behind the neck stuff back in the thruster slot was, I don't want to say wasted, because I definitely learned, and with the diet and all that, I'm not pushing enough weights that I was truly like wasting time, but I can now see like, all right, I'm not going to flip back and forth between those two as aggressively as I thought, because I am going to lose that dip timing because the movements are so different in that manner. So I'm actually, this was the last week with the thruster stuff too. I think that's ran its course. You'll see later. I'm working in some. I'll just let it go. I'll get there. This is last week's deadlift. I want to talk on this one too, because this was a pretty pretty big transitional point. Um, you'll see I've got a whole plate added to the bar from my previous work, but I've got the reverse bands set to take 75 pounds off the bottom. Um, I'm doing this for a couple reasons. So, what you just saw during that whole phase one was corrective and deadlift intensities that were learning and skill development and completely under the dynamic effort of training. Now, I want to get my deadlift back up to my max strength training, but I can't skip from skill based to strength based. I have to go through all the intensities intentionally um, in order to get there. So I do have to spend some time doing dynamic effort. And though this might not be quite fast enough to be justified as that true, pure dynamic effort, I do feel that I'm getting a little bit of a speed stimulus, a little bit of force production stimulus on the speed strength side. And I think, blending this as I decrease the reverse band tension and increase the straight weight while maintaining velocity, I will be back into that 70 to 80% range for my working sets without the accommodated resistance at 8 to 12 weeks out from the contest, which requires a max pull. So I think you can see how the timing of all of this blends us back into a top weight with continuing all of the form and the skill building that I put myself through. The reverse band setup is set up intentionally because the max pull I have to do is from 13 inches. Again, I want to continue the mechanics and the skills that I learned, so I want to be using the fullest range of motion while adding weight specifically to that window of a little bit off the ground, like a 13-inch pull. Feel free to ask questions on this. This check-in specifically is going to be pretty heavy. This one and the next one. This one's going to be the training videos. The next one's going to be on paper. They're both going to be pretty fucking dense. So feel free to ask questions either in my DMs or in the comments here. This is just my top single. I've got 10s on each side. I started fairly low on these with quite a bit of band tension to ensure that I can continually progress in straight weight for as long as I need to. So not only am I going for the strength stimulus of the total amount of weight on the bar, I'm also going for a strength stimulus in the mechanic of continually increasing over a long period of time. That mechanism is extremely important, most of the time almost more important than actually just pushing heavy weight week to week. It's the actual upward movement of the weight. Now, on to the next transitional point. What do I get out of my box jumps? I get an explosive adaptation in a stance similar to my deadlifting, squatting, overhead pressing, all of that, right? Well, that needs to be progressed, and I'm not trying to be the best box jumper in the world, so that's going to top out, and I need to put that explosive effort into something that I'm going to use in the show. So I want to one motion all the logs at the class show, and I need to start practicing one motioning at the beginning form, just like I described I had to do with my deadlift. I got to bring it all the way through all the phases to get to that top phase. So I'm using the pattern and the explosiveness of the one motion in really, really light weights, like 20 to 40% of my max, to get the same thing I was trying to get out of the box jumps with a little bit more specificity added, okay? And if you can't figure out what I mean by specificity with that context, who am I kidding? This is strength sports. Specificity means getting closer to what you need to do in contest. Fuck you for making me spell that out for you. So yeah, you can just see I'm really, really trying to work my footing, really trying to find that straight upward force trying to get as explosive as I can. And you'll also notice that I'm progressing in the explosiveness. I'm not just getting in and fucking hitting it. In fact, I didn't film the first couple, but the first couple were actually really, really slow motion. So you'll see, again, over the course of this next year, however long that I do this, going back to the deadlift, progressing through all stages. This is true in the session, week to week, block to block, macro cycle to macro cycle, year to year, like, you know, exercise to exercise, rep to rep, like, you know, this whole bell curve principle, this whole slow progression principle, it applies at every level of micro and every level of macro. How fucking juicy my forearms are getting, boy. Finally, you know. Chromes on the one motion with welding clips. It's like a fucking, you know, it's like putting chrome spinners on a fucking shitty Impala or something. Main thing I want you to notice here is they progressively get faster and faster, and how I'm really just, I mean, this is 40 pounds on an empty log. You know, the biggest thing I want to emphasize here is, like, take the time to learn this shit, and like, I don't understand what people are afraid of for lifting light weights. Like, are you afraid someone's gonna come over and fucking make fun of you? Like, learn this shit. It doesn't matter what's on the bar, you know. If someone walked by and saw me at the gym, if I was doing it at the gym, like, probably actually think like, damn, that dude probably takes his shit pretty seriously. And you look kind of professional. You don't look like a fucking idiot for lifting light weights, as long as you're doing it right and it looks like you got a reason for it. You know what I mean? So, and I struggle with it too. You know, I've been there and I still go there about really wanting to lift the heavy weights, because ego aside, that's what we love doing. That's what we do all this bullshit for, is to lift those heavy weights. But really, to get the most accurate lifts and the most comfortable lifts and the most longevity, all of it, like, you have to go through that flow of going back down and coming back up, like I said, at the micro and at the macro level. You know, if we're trying to push the sport and these movements that are continuously pushing the barrier of how much we can tolerate, and if we operate on accumulative mechanics, we will accumulate the things that cross over the barrier of what we can hold, right? Those things have to be revisited, otherwise they'll accumulate to the point of being most normal, and at that point they will accumulate faster than the good quality work. Clearly you can see how much more fluid and how much more better of a setup this is. I think a lot of problem that I had was I was just unracking it too low and I couldn't get really good solid T-spine position and brace. You'll notice I'm taking smaller and smaller steps out to hold that brace. It's a little less wobbly as opposed to the obnoxious setup on the jerk blocks. Now, I prefer the jerk blocks, but not when they're 6 inches below my rack height, and that's all they were. So I'm probably going to build some of my own and just do the exact height that I want. Set them up right there, you know, here, so I don't have to re-rack every time. But my timing and positioning was so much better that it made it worth it to have to re-rack. Next transitional point, the belt. You'll notice most of my work was beltless or with the breath belt. that was intentional. And I find that the breath belt is, again, one of those mechanic revisitor things that if I continue it too long, um, I almost like regressing in my brace mechanics and relying on it, kind of like toe spacers, you know. It's got to be progressed, and you're using your abdomen, your obliques, your entire core, that 360 brace to stretch the material of the belt. Um, and the breath belt's such an easy material to stretch that if you don't progress that, then it kind of becomes like a crutch in the sense that you cannot reach your full brace because it's too soft to truly push against. Um, Even under the hard belt, I find that it runs its course. So, for those of you wondering about belts, whatever that's worth. I worked up to 330. I was pretty happy with this considering that I wasted 2 weeks on the front rack and I matched, I was 5 pounds under. I think I had 335 as my heaviest on the last block. But the quality and the confidence and what I learned on this session and how I felt, I'm not going to call it a PR, obviously, but I am more than happy with the progression indicators, even though it wasn't heavier in weight. That was my miss at 340. All right, next transitional point, throwing. So you've seen me do this fucking weird bullshit where I just like hold the bag, do the pattern, and then jump without it. Like I said at the beginning of all this, it's a little bit of an experiment, but it's an experiment that I'm pretty much nailing, and it's working. And it's all about skill practice, capacity practice, and then the translation of those two into a final product. So my event in the January show is a one-arm toss. This is only a 15-pound bag, and I'm just going through the actual movements. This is my first time since my last contest in June of actually throwing. It's all been mechanical since then. So here's my first ever one-arm throws. I've never even done the one-arm throw technique. So a lot of this, like the posting on my other leg, the narrowing of the stance, the slow motion of the actual execution. This is my first time doing any of this, and I'm trying to adapt my two-handed technique to the one-handed. So typically, my post hand will come. I'll post on that opposite leg there, and I'll float the bag up as I step back, and then grab, and then drop down and throw. In this one, I'm doing the same thing. I'm just kind of using this hand to balance to make sure I'm not going like this on the way up. That's really important in throwing because it's such a velocity and technique based lift that any sort of bend, even when picking it up off the ground, is going to fuck you up, fuck your trajectory up. Here's my last deadlift session. Order got out of whack a little bit with Josh coming into town. We can blame that on him. I feel really good with these. Like, I know they're not moving super fast, but at the same time they kind of are, and feel easy. And this was the first week. This is the next transitional point. So not only am I blending the weight through the accommodated resistance setup, I'm also blending weight with the last two blocks of deadlifts. I did the straight sets where, if I did 3 sets of 3, all 3 sets were at the same weight. Now, I don't know if I've gone over my deadlift progression. It's a 4-week progression. 8 sets of 1 to 2, true dynamic work. 495 was this first block on this with the reverse bands. And then 515 for 3 sets of 5, and then 3 sets of 3 at 535, and then 2 sets of 10 back down at 495, and then add 20 pounds and repeat the cycle. The 2 middle weeks for me, the sets of 5, the 3 sets of 5 and the 3 sets of 3, they become 3 sets of 3 to 5 and 3 sets of 1 to 3. And they ascend 20 pounds each time, so that I'm expanding and pushing up on my range those 2 weeks, still circling back around and repeating the cycle, but those 2 middle weeks are ascending weeks. So this week here was my 3 to 5 week. First week doing this method, I laddered up to, I think it was 565, 575, whatever it would have been, with 3 20-pound jumps starting at 515. So 535, 555, but it's a squat bar, so 565. Next week I'll ladder up to the 585. And then I'll make the call from there. The next week I'll either do all of the top sets at the one top set from this block, or I'll ladder up again. I'll make that call when I'll get there. It'll be pretty evident. And I'll talk about that when we get there. But man, I'm so fucking happy with the way deadlifts are moving. These look so solid to me, especially for me. Like, never really had a good looking deadlift. Never had not back pain. And now every deadlift session I've had, I look forward to my deadlift sessions because it relieves a lot of back pain, actually, which is probably how it should be. Again, just like I went over with the throwing, where we're blending capacity with skill. I'm blending. The last 2 weeks I did one-handed picks, but they're at a low weight. Those are going to move up to the second slot deadlift on squat day, while I move my sprint mechanics, which I've been working on in warm-ups. I'll talk about that in the next update video, into an actual just true farmers. So I was doing acceleration mechanics unweighted with unilateral picks. I progressed those into 2-sided picks, and I progressed this as high as I could into full sprinting and accelerations for 50 feet. And then we're going to put them together and continue. Yeah, so I hope you're getting something out of this, but I do kind of hope it's confusing a little bit, because I want you to be able to have to figure it out. And partly I got to be explaining this more times, more frequently, so that it can get refined both in my own head and your own understanding. So kind of interesting watching this play out and explain it as it's happening. Prior to this, it's been guesswork as far as my confidence level goes. But now, I'm trying to say, it's worked enough times that I kind of want to demonstrate how it's going as it plays out, and then really refine it and nail it down, present it that way once we've got the true final product and I don't split my head open again. All right, thanks for watching.